why it was called a motion, but it's just an appointments made by you guys.
So at this time, what I will do here in just a moment is ask for a nomination. Once we get to 4 positions, we will end nominations as we will have council seats completed, and we will ask for a request to adjourn. At this time, is there a nomination for Ms. Sheila Vitale?
So moved.
We have a nomination by Mr. Leesburg. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a nomination by Mr. Leesburg and a second by Mr. Schnetzer. Roll call.
Hang on.
Mr. Lyric, point of order.
Yes.
How are you going to be going down the list of names? In what order, or have you selected?
No particular order at my discretion. Roll call.
Leesburg,
Yes.
Schnetzer,
Yes.
Lyric,
Yes.
McGregor, Nancy, you're muted.
I don't hear you say anything. Did you say my name?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
not muted,
Oh, okay, then.
but I didn't hear you say my name. I don't know
Oh, okay,
why.
sorry. McGregor,
Yes.
Renner,
No.
Angelou,
Yes.
Bowers.
No.
Thank
Motion
you.
carries. Motion carries. Ms. Vitale has been voted to a seat on one of Gahanna City Council's seats on Charter Commission. At this time, I would ask for a nomination for Mr. Ross Beckman.
So moved.
We have a nomination for Mr. Beckman. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a nomination and a second. For, Mr. Schnetzer has nominated and Mr. Leesburg has seconded the appointment of Mr. Ross Beckman to Gahanna Charter Commission for 2021. At this time, is there a roll call?
Schnetzer,
Yes.
Angelou, oh, I'm sorry, Leesburg,
Yes.
Angelou,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Lyric,
Yes.
McGregor,
Yes.
Renner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. That appoints Mr. Ross Beckman to the Charter Commission for 2021 for Gahanna City, for the city of Gahanna. At this time, is there a nomination for Ms. Isabel Sherwood?
Yes, I would like to nominate. Nominate.
I'll second. I'll second that, Lyric.
We have a nomination by Mrs. Angelou, a second by Mr. Renner. Roll call.
Angelou,
Yes.
Renner,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Lyric,
Yes.
Leesburg,
Yes.
McGregor,
Yes.
Schnetzer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Isabel Sherwood has been voted to the Gahanna City Charter, or Gahanna, City of Gahanna Charter Commission for 2021. At this time, is there a nomination for Mr. Jamie McKenna?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Renner.
We have a nomination by Mrs. McGregor and a second by Ms. Bowers. Roll call.
McGregor,
Yes.
Bowers,
Yes.
Lyric,
Yes.
Leesburg,
No.
Renner,
Yes.
Schnetzer,
Yes.
Angelou.
No.
Thank you.
Did you get me?
Yes.
That fulfills the 4 seats of Gahanna City Council. This time I will not ask for any further nominations. All positions for the Charter Commission to be appointed by City Council have been filled. And at this time, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Officially, we would need a second to go on through procedure.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Schnetzer, and roll call.
Renner,
Yes.
Schnetzer,
Yes.
Lyric,
Yes.
Leesburg,
Yes.
McGregor,
Yes.
Angelou,
Yes.
Bowers.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Nancy, it's all yours whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. That's right. I go up next.
He's adjourned,
Okay,
Lorraine, just
so-
in time.
All right. We will, we're all ready. We will, April, do you need a few minutes? Or are you ready?
You may want to wait 5 minutes just because our meetings officially start at 7. and we'll end at
Oh, I see.
6:55.
It's only 6:55. Okay.
I was going to
I wasn't
suggest you
looking
might want to wait.
I didn't look at,
You're too efficient today.
okay, so we'll wait 5
April,
minutes.
I got a note while we're in between that audio might not be working through one of the streaming services.
I believe IT is working on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Thank you very much.
That good enough?
That's fine.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
good luck in the meeting.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. Should we begin?
See, bud.
All right, it's 7 o'clock, 7:01 actually. So I will call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, February the 8th, 2021. So first item up is items referred by the Planning Commission. Ordinance 086-2020.
Yes, Councilwoman, if it is okay with you, I'll go ahead and get us started, much as we did the last time, when this was before council about 2 weeks ago. So once again, we are here before council to discuss the project that is known as the Crescent at Central Park. As a reminder for council and for all who might be listening in for the first time tonight, this is a multifaceted project that encompasses over 100 acres of property along Tech Center Drive. Right now, we're talking about both the north portion and the south portion. The project itself encompasses medical facilities, office, commercial, proposed project, medical facilities, office, retail, commercial, residential, and donated parkland of about 34 acres. Pending before council tonight is a proposal to rezone a portion of that land from commercial to multifamily. As noted, the residential is only one component of this. Right now, we're looking at the request to rezone 14.4 acres out of the over 100 acres of project that this encompasses. We should also note that the residential component project that we're talking about tonight here is not a high-rise building, much like you would see downtown. Rather, it is multiple low-lying buildings, given the location of the project on Tech Center Drive near John Glenn Airport. To just refresh council's recollection as to how we got here. This project, this request for rezoning was approved by Planning Commission back in the fall. It first came before council at a Committee of the Whole meeting on October 5th. There were multiple meetings and discussions that were had at that time. And again, at that time, the request for rezoning was for 17.9 acres to be rezoned from commercial to residential. During the meetings that were held between October and November, concerns were raised by council with regard to the size of the residential footprint. And at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 23rd, I believe it was, the project was postponed to allow a developer an opportunity to go back and revisit what that footprint of the residential project looked like. It then came before council again, January 25th, 2 weeks ago. At that time, the developer unveiled the revised plans to address council's concerns. And in those revised plans, the residential component went from 17.9 acres to 14.4 acres. So that is what we're looking at tonight, a request to rezone 14.4 acres from commercial to multifamily within the confines of this overall campus-like project. At the last January 25th meeting, we're back here at Committee of the Whole. As we were discussing that revision to the footprint, council then raised concerns with regard to the future use of that property and concerns that there be restrictions placed on the land so that no further multifamily development could occur within the confines of this project. So over the last 2 weeks, our team has been working diligently with the developer and his team to try to come up with legal options that we could explore to address council's concerns so that we can get this project moving out of the first stage of the development process here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Six, our interim director of development, to talk a little bit about what we've been doing for the last 2 weeks and what that might look like.
You're on mute, Jennifer. Uh-oh.
It's got to happen at least once, right? Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mayor, for that introduction. As Mayor said, this is a multifaceted project, and the development process has many, many layers. So this is not the only time that we'll be before you. The issue that we have tonight is getting and respectfully requesting this to come out of committee tonight for the rezoning. Typically, we're not presenting a development agreement ahead of rezoning because we don't have enough information within the agreement. But what I wanted to be able to come to you tonight and tell you is that for the past several weeks, we've been working with the developer who has offered to deed restrict at least 4 acres of the commercial property with only office use. And that 4 acres is to be determined based on the rest of the site plan and how that all lays out. An additional provision in there is a deed restriction for 40 years, which prohibits the development of any residential use on the commercial property. We hope that that pleases council. This transformational project has been in the works for years. Tonight, our plan is to provide you with enough information to give you what you need to bring this out of committee. And we're here to answer any questions that you do have. With us tonight, we do have Yazan Ashwari from Frost Brown Todd. He is a partner with the firm, specializing in land use, zoning litigation, and real estate development. We've asked him to participate in this evening's remarks from more of a high level from Central Ohio region. And with that, Yaz, I'll turn the microphone over to you. And don't forget to take yourself off mute.
Sure, thanks,
Jennifer. One quick question. Mr. Ashwari, are you representing the city? Are you representing the applicant? Can you just clarify that for me?
Sure. Thank you, Councilman. I'm here on behalf of the city. I've been working with the mayor and Jennifer and Ray in consultation on this project to provide some guidance where I can and some overview of best practices and tackling some of the issues that the mayor and Jennifer have laid out. So good evening and thanks for having me. I first got involved with this and understood it to be a zoning issue, and I learned that this is a very nice, very well thought out, heavily discussed larger project. And I just kind of want to give a little bit of perspective on what Jennifer and Ray and the mayor and I have been discussing, how this process compares to typical processes you'll see with a large development or proposed development of this nature, and answer any questions that anyone may have about that. So I'll start just from a high level. Everything that I've seen so far is consistent with how developments or proposed developments of this size and nature generally proceed. And as Jennifer pointed out, this issue that's before the consideration before the committee of the whole today, and that will be before council on the 15th, is just one piece, and that's the rezoning of this multifamily, the 14.4 acres. I feel that I've seen some questions come through via email and have looked at some of the issues, the larger issues about this development, and I can tell you there's a couple that come to mind. The restriction on further development of the larger property being restricted such that there's no more multifamily developed in the area. I think that's been addressed through the deed restrictions, and as we kicked around this issue, that was the only and best legal mechanism to do that. So I think that's been addressed. In terms of some of the incentives that could be at play during this matter, I understand this property is within a CRA and may be subject to school district compensation and potentially some TIF or tax increment financing setups. Those are all very useful, very good tools to have in the toolbox for the city. But as I understand it, those items, along with the larger development plan, along with the larger agreements between the city and the developer, are yet to be finalized. And I think to me, this is the domino that this rezoning is the domino that puts everything else in place. So I wanted to address some of those issues as I've discussed them with Jennifer and the mayor and Ray for the last couple of weeks, and really be here and be a resource if anyone has any specific questions, general questions, or if anything comes up in the meeting now or later. I think I'll pause there and turn it back over or field any questions that folks may have.
If I could, I'm just going to ask Michael Blackford as our representative from Planning Commission and our city planner, if he wants to just kind of tee it up then for the applicant, to summarize the city's perspective and where we are from a procedural standpoint.
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. Just really quickly recapping. Again, this is committee tonight on February 15th. There will be a public hearing and a vote on 2 separate items, a rezoning essentially from commercial to office. I'm sorry, from commercial and office to residential. Planning Commission recommended unanimously approval of this rezoning request. At that time, it was just under 18 acres and 312 units. That's been reduced at the request of council. Applicants worked on that. 14.4 acres and 240 units is what is proposed. There is the companion request, the variance. What the variance would do, if approved, it would allow for off-site recreation and parkland space rather than on-site. If it were to be on-site, the code would require 3.6 acres. The applicant is going to provide 34 acres of park space. So again, that's the second component. And again, Planning Commission saw this. They recommended approval of both of these items. As we kind of stated, this is the basically the first domino that would fall. We talked about future request development agreements. If this is request, there are additional building permits and development applications required in order for them to actually construct. There is a final development plan and design review that would have to go forward with Planning Commission as well. And with that, I will turn it over to the applicant's team. I believe Aaron Underhill might have some words for us tonight.
Thank you, Michael. Can everyone hear me? Thank you very much. Is there a way that I could please share my screen for a PowerPoint? I've got just 3 slides to show, but I think they'll be useful.
You should have an option at the bottom of your screen for screen share.
Let's see.
Or somewhere, I believe, or maybe it's in the ellipse at the top.
Oh,
Aaron,
okay.
it could be, yep, it's a little box with an arrow.
I see. Okay. Can everyone see that or not?
Yeah.
No.
Oh. Well, this figures. I'm so good at this.
If you want, Aaron, this is Michael Blackford. If you want to email that to me, I can share my screen, and if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll do that. I'm a little bit inept here, so 1 second.
Michael Blackford, it's Larry Canini. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
While we wait on Aaron to send you that, would you expand a little bit on the parkland dedication from a standpoint of the fact that it has been vetted through with Parks and Recs already regarding their opinion of it, just so everyone knows that that has already been vetted with staff and some review on that, since that was a big component of this.
Certainly. As part of the variance application review process that was submitted to various staff members, I had specific conversations with the Parks Department on the pros and cons of the request. Again, then the request was to have the off-site parkland rather than the on-site. And I don't know if this is a direct quote, but certainly Parks was strongly in favor of the offsite, with the possibilities of potential there on 34 acres rather than 3 acres of on-site recreation. And with that,
Oops.
I will share my screen here.
Thank you, Michael.
One moment.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you all this evening. We wanted to, in follow-up to our last committee meeting relating more to the land use and density and zoning components, to talk about what is an equally important part of what we're trying to do here, and that is the economic development components that are coming along with the project. And the way I would put it is mostly these are things that the city and the school district has a role to play here, but that they will be getting, and a little bit of what the developer is looking for. But this is a very clear win for the city, in our opinion, and wanted to walk you through how. And so I have 3 slides here. You'll see here that we've shown the multifamily property, and then we also have the commercial property, which was just over 26 acres, 26.6. And that essentially surrounds us on all sides except for the east. The eastern component, of course, does contain some development today, and really is, this is going to help that as well. But we feel like the components that are necessary to be included in the economic development agreement are what you see on your screen here. The park, which I think I've called out later here as 36 acres and may in fact be 34, that would be my mistake, but is shown to the south here. So we heard very loudly and clearly, especially from Mr. Schnetzer at the last meeting, that any more multifamily in the future is not going to be considered to be favorable, and we want to make sure that there's a mechanism in place to make sure that doesn't happen. So, as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have agreed to deed restrict all of the commercial property. We've said against any multifamily or senior living development. Obviously, that would also include single family. No one, I think, in their right mind would think this is a single family parcel. But we're doing that for a period of 40 years. And the reason I picked 40 years was there's a thing called the Marketable Title Act in Ohio. And once you get beyond 40 years, it becomes questionable of how it can be enforced. But 40 years, for all intents and purposes, will take care of all of our lifetimes. So in any event, that would run in favor of the city. And it's important to note that we're also going to place a restriction that requires us to essentially hold 4 acres of this commercial property as designated here for office development. It could be anywhere on the site. It could be broken up throughout the site, but for a period of 7 years. I think the reason we're going with 7 years is that's long enough that it's going to motivate our property owner here, the Buckles, to want to sell in that amount of time. It's long enough that they're not going to sit on their hands and wait for that to expire. It's also long enough to be meaningful for the city that they know we're going to put forth a good faith effort in order to market for office here on this site. So the underlying zoning of the property today is an SCPD, and an SCPD, that's an important fact here because it allows almost any use you can think of that's commercial in nature, anything from car dealerships to adult entertainment to hotels to retail. And one of those things is permitted as office. So by providing the deed restriction in favor of the city, we're essentially tying our own hands for this period of time with respect to what we can do on a portion of the property that has already got a wide range of uses allowed on it. So we think that those 2 restrictions, and which would only be waivable, by the way, by city council action, will I guess address the concern that was raised the last time about future possibilities for development. Also, as a part of this, the developer or developers are going to front the cost of a north-south street that you can see. And I don't know, Michael, if you can show on the western edge of the multifamily there. This is about a $3.4 million project that will include, it runs along the multifamily there between the multifamily and the commercial, and $3.4 million, and more on that momentarily. Well, I'll just skip down to the developer request. We are looking for a non-school TIF to be placed on the property to recover $1.4 million of that $3.4 million, which essentially amounts to around 40% of the cost there. But this is going to open up development of the rest of the property for some of the uses that we think are going to be really attractive to the city. We are also providing a voluntary commitment to a new community authority charge of 5 mils for the entirety of the property. It would apply to the multifamily for 10 years during the abatement period. It would apply to the commercial property for 30 years, which Yaz can weigh in on that, but that's somewhat typical for a community authority charge to be in place for that long. So if you go to the next slide, Michael. Can you guys hear me still?
Yes, Michael, are you able to? Sorry, your cursor disappeared.
Mr. Miller, while we're waiting, you said commercial, I heard the 30 years, and before that you said something else. What was that term?
Yes, for the multifamily, it would be 10 years. And the reason for that is we feel like we can apply that for the abatement period. And then once the abatement expires, we would prefer not to have that on top of the millage that's already there for a residential use. We think it'll make the project uncompetitive at that point. So you may ask what's in it for Gahanna, and this is a summary. I've got all sorts of backup data that can be shared, but wanted to keep it simple this evening. Really, we're creating 4 new sources of revenue with the potential, I think, with some relatively conservative assumptions, to generate $55 million over 30 years. I provided this chart here to demonstrate a non-school TIF, income taxes to be generated, hotel bed taxes from 2 hotels we're proposing or we anticipate, and an NCA charge of 5 mils. So I'll go through each of these in turn. In the non-school TIF, this would essentially be layered over the abatement for the first 10 years of the where the abatement applies, and we would essentially then be capturing 20% of non-school taxes. The schools would be made whole on that 20% over a period of 10 years, and then over the remaining 20 years, 100% of the non-school TIF revenue. So, schools are made whole once again. We would, at that point, we're going to probably be beyond the sharing of the money that's needed to reimburse for that 40% of the new public street. And we're anticipating $19 million available for the city's use without it being encumbered for any other purpose over a 30-year period. So that's significant. That is true under any of these 3 scenarios. And those 3 scenarios are on the left, a grand total to be generated here. In the middle is a column that demonstrates the current school district agreement and how I believe it applies here in terms of income tax sharing. And then the last column also anticipates a circumstance where you might decide to, it says 50% of the CRA, it should be of the NCA, would be shared with the school district. So you can see here as we move left to right, the amount available, $55.6 million from all these sources. If you take into account the sharing with the school district, the middle column would bring that number down to just over 50 million. And if you share the NCA charges there on the right side, that's about 49 million over 30 years. The income tax revenue in particular is based on what we found to be true in the marketplace in terms of amount of jobs generated for office, hotel, and retail uses, and salary numbers and values that are also realistic. Under your school district agreement, as I read it, there's a 50% sharing of income tax generated from abated property during the abatement period. So it's important to note that that's not during a 30-year period here. It would be in the first 10 years. And you can see here that I'm estimating that that's a little bit more than $5 million shared with the school district over that period of time. Yes.
Mr. Holt, sorry, this is Jennifer Six. We appreciate all these numbers. Just a special note to council, these are still conceptual because we haven't run all of the scenarios based on this is based on the developer's assumptions. Nothing has passed through council at this point. So I just want to put that out there. These are scenarios that we're still currently running.
That's correct. The bed taxes, as you all probably know, there's a 6% bed tax in the city, and 1/6 of that goes to the city itself. I believe the rest goes to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And then we have this new community authority charge of 5 mils that we're proposing. And you can see the bottom line numbers here. And Jennifer's point, I guess, was very timely. You know, a lot of this is about assumptions. We think these are realistic. Even if I'm wrong by 50%, these are pretty darn good numbers. And we believe that, you know, everything's tied together here in terms of this multifamily being the catalyst for a lot more that's going to be going on here. As far as the new community authority charge is concerned, frankly, we're not going to get any benefit of it. We saw it as a means to provide a new source of revenue for the city, not only from this project, but possibly on others. So if it's council's pleasure that they do not want to entertain a new community authority district, okay by us, but under state law, it has to be a voluntary charge placed on the property by the property owner. And of course, before development occurs, that's the time you have to do it. So we offer that as a suggestion and another tool in the toolbox, so to speak. Last slide, if you will, Michael.
Michael says there's a little bit of, there we go, lag time.
Yeah, there we go. So summarizing here, you know, tens of millions of dollars of revenue available, some to be shared with the schools. Hopefully that agreement can be renegotiated, but I still don't think it's fatal to the project in terms of really eliminating the benefits for the city. Hundreds of new jobs, the parkland, which may in fact be 34 instead of 36 acres, the deed restrictions, and finally a return on interchange property that's been sitting there for decades, not yielding to the city what it really could. And all of this, you know, to create a mixed use development that's becoming the norm in central Ohio and all over the place, with no use of the city's general funds, no commitments in that regard, and a commitment of only less than 10% of the total TIF revenue from a TIF we're proposing here. So if you look at the return on what is a very minimal investment by the city by rezoning this property and by you know, ultimately entering into a development agreement with us on these terms, it's a pretty darn good return, and would be exactly what you would hope to expect from a property in a location like this. So with that, I think we would like to come out of here this evening, obviously with the zoning moving ahead, but also some general feedback from you on what we're proposing here, and wanting to understand that even if we were to go forward with the zoning, that the economic components are just as important to us and therefore are worthy of a lot of discussion if we can have it. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Karen.
I raised my hand. I don't know if you saw that. Oh,
No,
okay. Could you give us a little more information on the new community authority?
Absolutely. So new community authorities have been used in a lot of different places. And as you can imagine, developers are oftentimes loath to agree to them because they are essentially a new tax. It's administered, though, in a sense that you have to provide a restriction. This is, I guess, another restriction against your property that requires the current and all future owners to pay the charge. There's an organizational, well, there's actually a board of trustees that governs these community authorities to make sure the funds are spent in ways that are compliant with state law. The city itself would get to appoint the majority of those members and therefore would theoretically and technically have control of the seats. Oftentimes they're 7-member boards. They can go up, I think, to 13 seats, and they have regular meetings, sometimes quarterly, sometimes annually, but decide how to spend the money. And that money can be spent on public infrastructure. It can be spent on acquisition of parkland. It's actually a little bit broader even than what is allowed to be used under a TIF legislation. So it's been used successfully in New Albany as an example. New Albany was one of the pioneers of this. It also, frankly, has the opportunity, if you'd like, to even include a retail sales charge on retail components. So it would essentially be an extra sales tax. I, for one, I'm not sure that that's a great big revenue generator, but it's something else that could be done. And I think from the city's perspective, if you were to do it here, it would finally provide the means to get this set up. And if you wanted to apply it to other projects and create an even larger revenue stream.
Just for clarity, Mr. Underhill, NCA revenues can also be used as to fund property acquisition?
That's correct.
So I wonder if I could insert myself here just for a second.
Okay. Well, Mr. Canini had his hand up here. Does he want to go first?
If I may, David, thank you. Thank you, Nancy. 2 points of clarity, just real quick on the heels of what Aaron just spoke of. 2 points of clarity, the actual park land dedication is 34.6 acres. I just want to make that clear. And then also that does not include the 5 acres that we also dedicated in conjunction with the Buckles Court North plat. And that's the creekway that dissects north and south between the proposed project and the medical campus to the east. So they're in conjunction. You have multiple park spaces. Number 2, Aaron, to your sales tax comment, that's actually a mechanism that Tanger Outlet uses on their projects for their mall stores or whatever you call them. I forget the name of the one up in Delaware, but in essence, they add an additional sales tax onto their stores that are within their campuses of their outlet malls. So just a point of following up to what you said.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hodge.
Sure, thanks. So I felt like at the last committee meeting, we had a great discussion. We heard lots of positive remarks about this zoning, which is what we're here on tonight, really moving forward to a decision of council on the 15th. We did note during that discussion that there was some additional information warranted in terms of this economic development package that would come on the heels of the rezoning. But in terms of the land use question, it was a great meeting last go around. Probably the thing that stuck with me the most from that last discussion came from some concerns raised by Councilmember Schnetzer. And what Mr. Schnetzer said essentially was that he wanted to make certain, to the extent practical under the law, that we make sure we have these value enhancing propositions, was a phrase, and higher value uses. That's the purpose of introducing this concept in writing of the deed restriction to the multifamily, to the senior living, and for a limited term, a commitment to 4 acres of office in lieu of the vast array of uses that Aaron mentioned under the SCPD. I'm thankful to see Mr. Ashrawi here because, at this point, you're not taking it from me or from Aaron or from Larry. You've got your own sort of third-party professional here from Frost Brown Todd that can verify the legality of that approach. So, we're here tonight with one meeting of the Planning Commission, a resounding recommendation of approval, a lot of hard work from our perspective, from council's perspective, certainly from the administration's perspective. But it's my hope that we've provided the information necessary on the economic development component here, and that folks are now comfortable moving this on for a public hearing on the 15th.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ashwari, you have your hand up. I hope I'm saying that right.
You are, thank you. And if it's easier, you can just call me Yaz.
Okay,
That's a little
thank you.
bit easier, so, of course. That was actually the first time I've ever used that feature, so I think I screwed it up the first time, so I apologize. But Mr. Hodge and Mr. Underhill covered kind of what I was going to say, so I'll be very brief. But I wanted to highlight first, just from stepping back, and I know Aaron went through a lot of the numbers, but from the city's perspective, this is, as I have discussed with staff, the benefits for the city, aside from the limited monetary investment up front, is development, good development, which is always good. It attracts jobs, number one, creates some new infrastructure, which a lot of communities in Central Ohio so desperately need, provides revenue through income tax, and creates some momentum in the city's overall development plan. So aside from the numbers, I just want to talk about high level, the kind of the benefits of a development like this. And then just kind of in a 180, just to kind of reiterate the purpose for this particular committee meeting. And I think Mr. Hodge touched on that a little bit too. It's great that you're able to get some idea of the thoughts and future development proposals and incentives and tools in the toolbox. But I think the kind of the purpose of this is to ensure that this rezoning piece for this 14.4 acres is passed on to council for that public hearing. Because I think, that's kind of the first piece of the puzzle. So again, kind of reiterating what's been said, but I didn't know how to put my hand back down, so I figured I'd chime in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council members or anybody else have questions? Mr. Stetzer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. First off, thanks to everybody for the presentation, city staff, the applicants. Two concerns are kind of lingering for me, and I just want to make sure that I kind of fully understand what's being proposed and the mechanics behind all of it. So the first item is in regard to the economics and/or mechanics surrounding the abatement vis-a-vis the residential housing component that's currently being requested. I'm sure many on this call can attest that compensation agreement is a bit complicated, or maybe perhaps not intuitive, is a better way of putting it. I know there exists some language that there should be or shall be compensatory payments made to the district. And traditionally, my understanding is that would come from income tax revenue sharing. Since this is a residential housing development, and there was likely to be limited income tax revenue generated from it, where will the revenue due to the schools come from? And is there any way that this could end up being a net loss to the city, where the costs or whatever is owed to the schools exceeds revenues generated?
I don't know whether the administration wants to answer that or whether you'd like me to jump in. I can go either way.
Jen, can you speak to that?
I can to a point. This is a non-school TIF, meaning there's no risk to the school for losing out on what they otherwise would have received had there been no abatement in place. We would need to look at the numbers for the CRA. This is CRA 4. It gets a little complicated in the agreement because we have the Eastgate TIF and then we have the Buckles or the Crescent TIF. I am not going to speak because I haven't seen all the numbers yet. So Aaron, if you want to weigh in on that.
Sure. Well, the way, Mr. Schnetzer, this is a great question, and I spent a little time today really trying to understand that agreement. And it's funny in one respect. It's a very short agreement, and in another way, it's like you got to read it 4 times in order to understand it. But my reading of the agreement is that there is, during an abatement period, there's a 50-50 sharing of income taxes, and that is to be applied essentially toward a minimum payment that is required every year during the abatement, which is equal to 50% of the abated school taxes, if you follow me so far. Then there are 5 or 6 buckets of money, so to speak, that are to be used to get to that 50% minimum, one of them being income tax. The other is any unabated value, which in this instance would be 20%. Obviously, we'll have 80% abatement, but the 20% subject to the TIF, we're not touching the school's money. And so you get a credit back towards that. And then all of the other buckets that are available to provide are either no longer effective, such as personal property taxes, or really the city is in the driver's seat as to whether they've provided something to the schools voluntarily that could be counted towards that minimum, but nothing commits your general fund to make up that difference. And that's my reading of it. So really what I think you're looking at here is if there are no income taxes being generated from the multifamily, you're looking at the schools getting their 20% that's not being affected by the TIF until such time as you get some income tax generating uses.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. I just want to make sure I understand. So if the schools, let's just use simple numbers. If the schools are due $100 of the unabated value, if the abatement didn't exist, they, under the agreement, they would be due $50, and then that $50 can come from, essentially you said 5 buckets?
That's right. And
okay.
And I would say here, because we have we might have a little bit of income tax from someone running units or something, but put that aside, there'd really be nothing available from there. They would continue to be getting the 20% of the unabated school taxes, and that would go towards that minimum amount due. And in my mind, the rest of the available buckets to pull the money from really they don't include your general fund, and in fact, probably are never going to come into play. So it's a little nuance in the agreement that I think runs in the city's favor, and I know we're all happy to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, if I may, just one more, I guess, question
Sure.
or concern. Thank you. So the second issue is the one that we've really been talking about here, and that's regarding the future use of the remaining acreage that's apart from that being requested to be rezoned. I understand this is being pitched as a master development, but the reality is it's being implemented piecemeal, with the first component or the first groundbreaking, if you will, being, again, this multifamily residential portion. So to state the obvious, the economy is clearly still grappling with the fallout from a once in 100 year pandemic. There's all sorts of implications as it relates to workplace facilities such as office, the hospitality industry, including hotel. It's a very long-winded way of saying our crystal ball is a little hazy right now. So what I'm personally seeking is some level of assurance that future development that's being pitched, and again, these are the follow-on developments, the hotel, the banquet center, the office space, some assurance that they will actually occur to the extent possible given potentially shifting market demands. My understanding is, again, that there are financial, let's call it, components to this development. We talked about TIFs, we talked about abatements, reimbursements. I can really think of no better way to align the interests of the developer and the property owner to that of the city and the community than to link that future follow-through to those financial incentives. And so just spitballing here and kind of using a bit of a carrot or the stick approach, is there a way to structure an agreement whereby if those future uses don't occur, there's a forfeiture of the financial incentive, whether it's the abatement or the TIF reimbursement, and perhaps even a clawback? Is that even technically feasible? And then I guess that would, if so, then it would bring up the question of how amenable are the parties to something like that.
Yaz, you want to take the first one?
Yes.
I was going to say, I think the second question is probably the more important one. Well, at least to start with, whether the parties would agree to something like that. Because I think the way that I read the CRA abatement language, it entitles any property owner that meets the certain minimum thresholds to an 80% tax abatement in this CRA area. And so it would require at a minimum agreement to forego that in the future. And I'm not sure that I've certainly not done anything of that nature that I can recall that ties those incentives with future land development. So the best way to control land development is through zoning. And or the deed restrictions and covenants placed on property, which I think is at play here. Incentives tied to future developments, I suppose, could in theory be a part of a larger development agreement. But that's, I don't know that that's entirely common or best practices for something this along these lines, but so that's my initial reaction to that.
Yes.
Yes.
This is Jennifer. May I interrupt? And not to restate again the obvious though, but even if the incentives are offered, if the development doesn't occur, then the developer doesn't get the incentive. Correct? Or Mr. Schnetzer, are you wanting to tie future use? If the apartments are built, you want to ensure that there's going to be commercial and office surrounding it.
Yeah, the latter statement, I guess, is factually accurate. That's the goal that I think, I believe we're all trying to really accomplish here. Again, I just want to state that while we understand this is a master plan, it's coming piecemeal. We can't predict the future. We don't know how quickly people are going to go back to work, in what capacity, what percentages. We don't know how robust of a recovery hospitality will see. So there's a lot of those uses that are being presented. I think we would all, let me rephrase this. If this came it's truly as a master plan, and the applicant said, we have, 4 office buildings, 2 hotel users, and a banquet center ready to go, and we're going to break ground tomorrow, I don't think we'd still be here. This would have already been advanced. The catch is that we kind of have to take a leap of faith. And this isn't personal. I mean, it's not to say that anybody's going to try and hoodwink anybody, but we don't know what the future holds. And really the issue here is a potential misaligning of interests. And that is that, let's be honest, whatever the property gets developed as will benefit the property owner and the developers regardless. The city may or may not see much benefit, and the city's benefit is dependent on what is developed, right? So what we're trying to accomplish, I think, is basically how do we ensure to the best degree that we can that more desirable uses go in there. And again, the reality is development's a business, and business exists to make money. Doesn't mean anybody's bad. So how do we link that, that monetary component to future performance, given all of the uncertainties that we have? Again, obviously the biggest among us right now is this 100-year pandemic.
One of the things, it's a good, I understand the sentiment, Mr. Schnetzer, and I know, it's not personal. I do think the great thing you have here is a community partner in Larry Canini, and we all hope Larry will live forever, but he probably won't. But in any event, at least in the short run, we've got him involved, and he wants to do the right thing by the city. That's just a hollow promise, I understand. But one of the things we did with the I guess with what we're proposing in terms of economic development is I wanted to make sure that the city's dollars that it was foregoing were really minimized. if you look at this, we're really creating here again these 4 sources of revenue, but we're really not taking, if you want to put it that way, much from the city. You know, on a real estate tax bill, the city probably gets 2 or 3%. And so it's, you know, unfortunately the way it works, but we're using other people's money through the abatement and even through the TIF. And so, you know, to me, to see if this, given that this property's been here for 30 years since interchange has been there, maybe it's been longer or shorter, and hasn't seen anything happen, it seems worth the risk to provide a little bit of a jump start here through this and see if it works. And if not, the city's really not out anything.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, Mr. Underhill, when you mentioned using other people's money, can you explain what you meant by that?
So when you abate property or place a TIF on it, you're, in the case of an abatement, you're forgiving taxes on improvement value. So new improvement value that is created is essentially the taxes on that's forgiven. Now all of the underlying agencies and the school district, et cetera, still get the amount of school taxes that are attributable to the land. So they're getting something out of it and probably getting something out of an appreciation of the land based on transactions. But for a period of time, there is a forbearance of taxes due and payable. In the TIF context, what you're doing is you're redirecting monies that are typically put aside into the various coffers of various agencies and putting them into a special fund to help fund infrastructure for a period of time. And the theory being the community at large, including all of these other agencies that have levies, in the long run will be better off because we're creating more value for them to tax. So, you know, that's kind of where I'm coming from on that is, if you look at what the city is giving up here, it's a very small percentage as a you know, as a whole.
Mr. Leesburg.
Yeah, I just wanted to say again, I kind of spoke my mind on this project the last time. You all know me, you know what I do for my day job and for my night job. And for giggles, I got on a nonprofit board that is trying to build a $120 million project in the central Ohio area. And I've currently got 2 cities that are tripping over themselves, begging us to bring our project to them. And I mean, to sit here and ask guarantees for development, Mike, you know, can you guarantee me a 6% return on a stock? You can't do it. And to put that on a developer is ridiculous. I mean, Reynoldsburg this last year built 800 new residential units and all of the support things that go with it, office, restaurants, infrastructure, everything else that goes with that. And they're hoping to do double that next year. If you drive up 315 north of 670 around Battelle and Ohio OSU Hospital, there's nothing but 6-story townhouses with people moving in and everything else. We're sitting here, they've limited the amount of residential that'll be here for 40 years. We can't ask any more. This is a zoning thing. There is no guarantee on what this thing is going to generate for anybody. And if it sits empty, they're not asking for any abatements. Again, I don't understand what we're doing here. This project has been around. I was promised a Bass Pro Shop 10 years ago, and it's sitting empty since then. I just can't get past. This is a zoning issue, and we're talking about economic development 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And I get it. We're landlocked and we're limited on the amount, and we got to do it right and everything else. But we are beating this horse to death. You know, it kills me. I can't get over why we can't get out of our own way.
Okay. Karen, do you have a question?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. You know that you'd mentioned 30 years. Well, you know, I've been around here longer than that. And I've been waiting for this product to move forward. And I know all of the but what if? Well, you know what? What if we could have the end of the world tomorrow? So the more we wait and wait and wait, the less comfortable people begin. Larry Canini's been around our community for quite some time, as are some of the other developers that have been around here for quite some time. And I don't think I've seen a particularly bad product that Mr. Canini has worked on. And it appears to me that there are many people sitting around this table tonight, besides council members, that are giving us a whole lot of good information. It is time to move on. If we're not going to do it, just say we're not going to do it. But I think that the Buckles property actually started, I'm not sure it was in the 1990s. It might have been in the 1980s. And I was here for all of it, expecting it to already have been built. I think there's been reasonable information given to us. And you know what? The world, we can have a huge explosion, tomorrow. Let's move on. Let's move on. Let's get this finished. Let's show the people that this is going to be something that we're going to be proud of in our community. And, I wish there was a 100% insurance policy on this. There's never going to be a 100% insurance policy on anything. But let's sure hope that our community can thrive from whatever this ends up being. It's time. And those are my final comments.
Thank you. Michael, do you have a question?
More a comment, I suppose, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify the concerns that I'm raising. I don't think are unreasonable given the context of where we're at. What I'm asking for is some comfort that the applicant will carry forward their own proposal. Not trying to shoehorn anything here, just simply looking for some confidence that what they presented will actually come to fruition. In light of the fact we are sitting in the middle, hopefully we're on the back half of it, but in the middle of a 1 in 100 year pandemic where there are all sorts of economic uncertainties. We are, as council members, fiduciaries of our residents, our constituents, the community. And to just take a leap of faith seems to be an abdication of that duty. And so I have zero desire to get into an argument, but I did pose a question of whether or not it was A, technically feasible, and B, if there was any willingness on the part of the applicant to tie some sort of financial carrot and or stick to the fulfillment of the proposal that they themselves have proposed. And I'm not sure that I've had that question has been answered.
Well, I will say, as you know, I'd actually like, hey, Larry, would you be willing to kind of give us, I mean, I know this isn't going to be a legal commitment at this point, but could you tell us a little bit about your philosophy for how you're going to be marketing this for development?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Obviously, I'm making some notes to myself on how I'd like to comment to address all that's been asked. And with permission, like to share what I think is some history as well, both past and recent history. But if I'd almost prefer to, with many hands still up in the air there, I'd like to kind of get all of the council members' thoughts before I respond, so that I'm hopefully answering a lot of questions with my response and not just those directed by Mr. Schnetzer.
Okay. Lori, do you have a question or comment?
I did, but I believe Ms. Bowers had her hand up first, so I'll let her go first.
Okay,
Thanks.
Sure. Marissa?
Yes. Madam Chair, I have a series of questions. Would you like me to sort of put them out so they can be addressed in an appropriate manner by whoever is the right person to address them, or just go one at a time?
Why don't you put them out?
Okay. I think this first question is really more directed at Ms. Six and maybe Mr. Blackford and the administration. I guess I have a bigger kind of pulling back from this particular project. I wanted to get your take, especially as you are the professionals that are guiding us and we have to, in a large part, rely on your advice. There seems to be two kind of different approaches in how development like this is pursued. One theory seems to be like what maybe Dublin, or excuse me, what New Albany does, where they build the infrastructure first, and then with the sort of very specific idea of what's going to be developed in a particular parcel. We seem to be maybe doing something a bit the other way, which is developing something with the intent to get the infrastructure put in, with the hope that we're going to get what we want later, the highest and best use, to use Mr. Schnetzer's language. So I guess I appreciate the first domino kind of theory, but I was wondering if you could speak to us a little bit about development theory around these sort of two different models, and maybe could give us a bit more confidence in why this model is right for us in this moment. The second question is a finance question. I maintain concerns about the cost to the city, and I understand that sort of taken in isolation, this development is a relatively low cost to the city, but I maintain concerns about what the actual line item cost is for the school compensation agreement. My understanding, and perhaps this is something that we could get a bit more clarity on, is that the school will be owed 50% of the appreciated value of the property after the development is completed. So if we go from a $1 million parcel to a $10 million parcel, we're talking about 50% of the tax of the revenue that the school would have had under that $10 million development, not simply under the $1 million. So I'm hoping that maybe the finance and the administration could actually give us a line item so that we could really understand what the cost to the city is going to be, and ultimately what the cost to our taxpayers is on this. That I think covers the two big concerns that I have with where we are.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Bowers. Regarding your first question, I will tell you, I've spent a long time in municipal government, actually working in the government, on the government side, and back in the day, the cities had a little bit more money, and if you build it, will they come was kind of a risk that cities took, and cities spent millions of dollars on their own, putting in roads, additional infrastructure that may or may not have suited development. Throughout time, cities have become a lot more sophisticated in working with developers in public-private partnerships, and there's a reason for that, because the burden should not be borne solely on the backs of the city and the taxpayers to provide roads and all the other infrastructure that goes along with it. Ultimately, yeah, it's in the right of way. But the reason for the public-private partnership is so that development can occur quicker and that the city can provide certain subsidies in order to help offset the cost, the high cost of development. In order for a city to get what it wants, it has to contribute in some fashion. We see this all over the place. And I can't tell you how many empty industrial lots that I see out there that have roads that go to nowhere, or it's a stubbed cul-de-sac that never really got developed. The developer is our partner, and this is the right deal for this. But the we build it, they will come model just doesn't work anymore. And I don't know, Donna, if you want to weigh in or Yaz on that.
Yeah, this is Donna. I'm happy to weigh in on that. Ms. Bowers, I'm not sure what your impression is of how development is done in Dublin, but certainly roads were not built if they didn't know that there was going to be a project there to support it. So
I misspoke. I corrected to New Albany. I apologize. It
Okay.
was not referencing Dublin specifically. I misspoke.
All right, I just wanted to be sure. And two, I think that if you have a master plan, if we're talking about New Albany, that's a planned community. That very much has been planned in a very specific way. They have certain areas that they knew they want developed in a certain way. And so the infrastructure was allowed to move forward to allow that development to happen. So it's just a different way of going about things.
If I may add about New Albany, I've done every major zoning in New Albany for the past 15 years. I'm not bragging, I'm just saying that's the truth. I've been involved in every one of them. I'm about to file a very big zoning to rezone. It will boggle your mind. I will file it this year on how large it is. So it tells you that even places that really have their master planning in place still have the need to rezone and plan for the future. So they don't always get it right.
Okay, who's next? Mayor, do you have a question or comment? Do you want to wait for Michael? Michael, why don't you go?
I don't think he heard you.
Michael, do you have a question or comment?
Your hand's up.
Which one are we talking about, me or Mr. Blackford?
Michael Schnetzer?
If my hand is up, I apologize. I'll hit the button now. Is it down now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay. The one question that I had was, and it kind of going off, is there any way we can require that that the park by a date certain? Is there any way? And I don't know if that's a Ray question or if that's, I mean, like, can we have if this zoning be require that by May 31st the parkland is transferred to the city, or is there a plan?
I'm not exactly positive on it. That's one of the reasons why I brought Yaz on, because he's much more well-versed in these areas than I am. But my understanding is that through the variance that we're granting, that variance can be conditioned upon things such as that. But that is not a definite statement at this time. Yaz, if you have anything to add to that, I'd welcome it. Otherwise, it's something I would have to get back to you on, because I'm not exactly sure that answer is correct.
Right.
I think,
okay.
Yaz may have had to step away, but I don't know if Mr. Canini might be willing to speak to that issue.
If I may, I will start with that, Mayor, if I could, and Madam Chairwoman. Nancy, to your question, there is actually a separate agreement that is on file with the city that was prepared by the city that made, it was a lengthy agreement with multiple commitments from both the Buckles family and the city. And this dates back to 3 administrations ago when Tech Center Drive was built. And one of those commitments was this parkland that we speak of, 34 acres, was to have been donated by the year end of 2020. So one of the critical reasons why the Buckles hired me back in 18 to kind of get started on this was to make sure that all of the terms of that agreement on both sides were met. And that was why we made the effort in trying to get the previous administration to focus on revisiting and addressing the comprehensive uses of this overall site, not just the 40 acres we're talking about tonight, but the entire site. So I think that's why it became one of the focal points in the most recent comprehensive plan. And so with that, that gave us the ability to move ahead with the first phase of the project, which was building Buckles Court North. And then we wanted to focus on this SCPD area, this 40 acres. And again, as I've stated numerous times, for us to attract the uses that we were going after pre-COVID, such as hotel, retail, so on. We continue to hear that we needed some residential component to provide for folks to be there after work hours. And we also knew, as you've heard many times in these presentations, that those services need to be there for the daytime people as well, the employees. So the goal was to have all this rezoning for what was left to zone, per se, all completed by 2020. But that, of course, got held up a little bit with COVID, but we were on pace with the October Planning Commission approval to have had it completed by year end, but we didn't make it. So in essence, Nancy, there's an agreement already in place to make all that happen. And again, there's commitments on both sides that will occur. But I have no qualms with this zoning or this variance change being a trigger mechanism to require us to do it. So that, I hope that answers your question.
I think it does, and I really appreciate. I know it was a big effort to bring back the changes to the amount of zoning for residential, and I really think that you guys have really tried to answer most of our concerns, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Marissa, did you have a question? Your hand is still.
Yeah, just to clarify, and before I know the mayor is going to address a lot of the concerns that I think have been raised. I wanted to make sure that it was reiterated that these questions are intended to assure our constituents, make sure that we are doing our duty, that we are asking the questions that need to be asked, that we are making sure that we can justify votes, however that vote might happen. My last question was not intended to be anything other than asking for justification so that we can move forward in good conscience with votes. So I appreciate the distinction and the clarification as to why how things were developed maybe 10 or 15 years ago is not the path forward right now. So thank you, and I just wanted to make sure that the professionals who are supporting the city understand that this isn't necessarily meant to be hostile. It is meant to be probing. So thank you.
All right. Mayor, do you have comments, questions?
Sure, I do. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I'll pick up where Councilwoman Bowers left off. I think we all, and when I say we all, I mean the administration and all of our staff has participated in tonight's discussion and in all of the months of work that have gone into this, and in fact, years that have gone into this, because I'll reference prior administrations and prior staff that have been working on this project. I think we all understand and appreciate the concerns that have been raised. We have the last vestige of major property to be developed in this city. We all want to make sure that that property is developed in a way that yields the best interest and the best income for the city to add to our tax base and to set the city up for future success. And what that looks like, I think, has changed over the course of the years. I think Councilman Leesburg said, 5-10 years ago, it was going to be a Bass Pro Shop. I remember that discussion. Everybody was all excited. Bass Pro Shop was going to come and we were going to build hotels and have retail all around it. And that was going to be the anchor. Now, the way development has progressed, it's these campus-like developments that are truly live, work, play communities with office and parkland and trails and residential and retail and commercial. That's what every community is building, everyone but one, us. This is a transformative project for us. And, I understand the concerns that have been raised. And the reason we reached out to Yaz, because I can't say his last name either. So the reason we reached out to Yaz in the first place was because we wanted to get the best direction that we could in order to address the concerns that were raised by council 2 weeks ago. I understand your concerns. We wanted to talk to him, somebody who's an expert in the field, to say, here's the concerns our council raised. what can we do within the legal confines available to best address these concerns? And the response that we got, I think, was more than we ever expected. It was a developer who responded by offering to put deed restrictions in place on the property. And I think Yaz had to jump off his call, but his response when we told him that there was an offer of deed restrictions, his words were, "That's the best you could ever hope for." And it is, to have a developer willing to come forth and say, we will put deed restrictions in place to guarantee that it stays consistent with your zoning, that it won't be used for any more multifamily other than what you have zoned. So beyond that, I think Yaz has already said, the only other available mechanism that we have in place to address the concerns is through zoning. If we don't like the way it's zoned, we can change the zoning code. We're in the middle of a year-long zoning code rewrite right now that will have opportunity for input, both from council and the community. So if you want to limit what commercial is defined as and what's allowed in that area, we'll have an opportunity to do that. But I think we're all out of options in terms of trying to provide a guarantee for the use of property. I would say and submit that everybody has done the very best they can. And if I'm coming across confrontational, I don't mean it to be either. I'm just very passionate about this, and I'm passionate about this project. But I think that we have all worked very hard. And I mean, everybody on this call, from council members raising questions, pushing and probing and making sure that we have provided you with the information that you need to make informed decisions, to Aaron and David Hodge and Mr. Canini for thinking outside the box to try to come up with something that would address your concerns and also protect the interest of the property owner, the Buckles family, to our development team and our planning team with Michael and Ray to try to think outside the box as to how we could address these. I hope everybody understands that there's been a lot of work that's gone into this to try to come up with solutions. So, right now, I think we all agree that we all have fiduciary duties and we all feel an obligation to act in the best interests of this city. Nobody has a monopoly on that feeling. Everybody on this call, from the administration to council members, feel the need to make a decision that is in the best interest of the city and in the best interest of the residents, and that sets our city up for success. We might not always agree on what the best way to go about that is, but I think we can all stipulate that we have that at heart here. So, I guess where I'd like to just bring everybody back to is the issue before us tonight is a rezoning issue. We can't begin to get to all of the other subjects that were raised tonight until this developer knows what they can and cannot build on this property. So our ask again tonight is to allow the rezoning of this for multifamily for commercial to multifamily, this 14.4 acres, with the understanding, and we are working on the development agreement that is the next phase, which will come before council at some point, that will include the deed restrictions on the use of this property, and to hopefully get this potentially transformative project for our community out of the gate and down the road. Thank you.
I think Larry's got a hand up.
Yes, you're on mute.
Mr. Canini, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
I was trying to call on you. I was muted.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Michael, did you have any more comments before I say my final piece tonight?
Mr. Canini, is that directed at me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Schnepper. I'm sorry.
Sure. If you don't mind me, jumping in line here, I'll go. Again, this is not intended to be confrontational at all. It's a matter of fact. There was a question that I posed earlier about, is it possible? And if possible, is it agreeable that there be some sort of, again, financial linkage, if you will, to future performance? A potential example could be something like, I think we've seen in the proposal, there's a future ask for TIF revenues to help offset some of the costs of the infrastructure improvements. Could those be subject to clawback in the event that there isn't a performance of the project as proposed. And I just want to ask that question again to make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to answer it. I know there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of dialogue here, but there hasn't been an answer. So I just want to make sure that we give everybody on the call an opportunity to at least address the question.
May I address that?
Yeah, Ray.
Thank you. We can look into it. I talked to Yaz about that, and as he stated here, he's never seen that before, but we can always look into it. But here's the key you got to remember. No matter what we put in this, it can always be changed in the future, no matter what. The future council can change this. So we can put whatever you want in here, but it can always be changed in the future. So even if there is a way to do a clawback provision like that, doesn't give you the guarantees that you want. There are no greater guarantees that we have other than the fact that it's already zoned the way we want it zoned. And if it doesn't get changed, nothing else happens. So that's the best defense that the city has for this. So in answer to your question, as best as I can answer it, we will look in to see if it is able to do a clawback provisions. Maybe Mr. Underhill could answer that better than I. He's been involved in these type of things more than I have. But even if it is, I don't see how it's possible for us to even defend those actions in the future if future councils decide to change their mind. So that's where I keep stumbling over the request. And that's the reason why I brought Yaz on, because I kept coming up with that answer and I wanted to get you a better answer. I want to say yes. I want to give you something, and that's what I'm trying to do. So I hope that answers a little bit, at least, since you felt like it wasn't answered. I hope that at least lets you know how I feel on the subject.
Thank you, Mr. Milarski.
Okay, Mr. Kanini.
Yes. Honestly, I think everybody you can go around the room here tonight, and the only person that could say yes or no to that request right now would be me. And ultimately, that is something where I will need to convene with Mr. and Mrs. Buckles. But this I can say at this point, and that's where I wanted to kind of just remind everybody of a couple things that we've touched on before historically here. Number one, as I said earlier, we awaited on the updated comprehensive plan to help guide us on which direction to go with the project. So we went above and beyond a commitment on Buckles Court North, and in essence, provided for what was SCPD zoning. We have limited it to office and professional use. So there is basically 20 acres right there that we created and restricted for just office use. And not only that, the Buckles family put up all the money for the infrastructure, $1 million+. We didn't ask for TIF. We didn't ask for any funds from the city. We didn't ask for anything from the county. So there alone was really the first step in creating what we felt was a need to fulfill and bring the commercial uses we want. And so far, we've been pretty successful if you consider where we are today with the pandemic. We have a 40,000 square foot, fully occupied, very heavily income taxed payroll there that's doing what we all wanted to see happen. We now have a surgery center coming adjacent to it. And I truly believe we will have a few more medical buildings that will come on the heels of that. So let's not forget that none of you even were concerned about that until we talked about the apartments. But we have already done that. We made that commitment long ago. So the next step was, with any project like this in Central Ohio, you've got to start to provide for the labor force and where they can live. And I can attest, and Ms. Bowers, your comment about New Albany, I am a developer in New Albany. I've been a partner with New Albany Company. And we had a project up there that was 50 acres, and I took a few of the council members to tour that a few years ago. That was a project that, unfortunately, when we completed that infrastructure, the recession hit. So we had to be flexible, and we had to be kind of quick to our feet to understand, okay, now what? We thought we were going to have these uses come. The city had guided us and said, listen, bring us services, because we've got the hospital here now. We have the business campus to the east of it. We need services. All the employees are complaining there's no food service, there's no hotels for people to come in and stay when they come to visit the campuses and the hospitals, and the patients at the hospitals for the hips and knee surgeries and so on. So we ended up actually going a whole different direction, and we ended up with 3 hotels. We never expected 3 hotels there, but we did. And then we found there was a need for senior housing. And then we found there was a need for food services and daycare and gas and so on. So again, it was a function of making sure that what we had there in New Albany, as an example, was flexible and shovel ready, because I've mentioned that before. We can sit here and talk all day long about what should be coming, but until we get the infrastructure in, nobody's even going to take a look at it. So that's the critical component to getting the infrastructure going. Pre-COVID, we had those discussions with the hotels and the retail, and I do believe those will still come. I try not to look at it in a negative way, but I think we all agree that we're on the tail end of this thing, and things will start to get better. And let's not lose sight of the fact that as we talk today, we're easily a year away before we even move any dirt. So by the time we get through all the approvals, we get the engineering done, and we start moving dirt, it's a year from now. So these sites won't even be ready for 18 months probably in regards to the commercial uses that we're talking about. So I think that lag time is plenty for us to be confident that these uses will come. Last of my 2 points is, as we talk about the TIF legislation and the benefits of the TIF, we don't really benefit from the TIF at the front end. We only benefit when product actually gets built there. So number one, the apartments, but more importantly, the commercial that we hope to gain by having the infrastructure in. That's the critical time that the TIF kicks in. So we're already lagging behind. I mean, we're already committing all the money up front to build the infrastructure. And we're talking about mass grading. We're talking about an area that's partially in floodplain. So we have significant cost. And I know Aaron addressed it in the $3 million range. Where do you think that's coming from? We're not getting that from you. That's coming from us at the front end. So if I'm not successful in bringing commercial uses and other uses there, I'm the one that's going to be hung to dry, not you folks, because I'm the one promising these people that I'm going to deliver. So you need to put your faith in me more than anything else. And lastly, what guarantees did the Buckles get when the city came to them back in 2007 and said, we want your land to build a Tech Center Drive roadway thoroughfare to connect our Central Park so we can create and open up a big industrial office area? What guarantees were they given? How many years now, as Karen alluded to, how many years have the Buckles waited now? What guarantees did the city give them? Zero, nothing. And you can't ask for more patient people than the Buckles right now. And God bless them for their patience, because they don't deserve to not have people like us and the brain trust that we all put together here to make something happen. So where was their guarantee? So at the end of the day, everything we're talking about all makes sense. You're hearing it from your consultants, you're hearing it from the attorneys, you're hearing it from everybody. So please, let's think positive. Let's think about the good things that can come from this, and let's not always look towards the negative. There's enough of that going on right now in society. Let's try to be positive and move this project forward once and for all.
Okay, Michael?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So just, this would be the last 2 things I say on this particular topic. I do want to just note, for the good of the order here, that The property owner is free to develop this in accordance with the existing zoning. The city is not standing in their way one iota. We're just making sure that the rezoning request doesn't somehow diminish or pigeonhole us into something that's unintended. But with that, I do want to thank everybody for what I think is a good faith effort to address all of these questions and concerns. That's top to bottom from the administration, Ms. Six, Dr. Goss, Mr. Ashwari for your time, Mr. Malarski, Mr. Hodge, and Mr. Underhill, and Mr. Kennedy, and all of my colleagues on council. So I appreciate everybody's time on this.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? So this is, this will be on for vote next Monday, and I will take it, well, this will be on the regular.
I'd ask for consent, Nance, but
I can ask for consent. I mean,
I can ask. It's, you know.
We do have the public hearing next week, correct?
correct. There's a public hearing next week.
So if I could ask just from a point of clarification, so is there a plan to vote for next week then?
Please.
Is it first read? Because I think didn't we already have first reading, or do we have to go back to first reading?
I think we had first reading.
Yeah, we did.
And this would be, I think we need to vote on this next time because of the 60 days. We extended January 2nd. We extended this for 60 days. So I think we need to vote on it next week, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe it's public hearing, second reading, adoption next week.